I think we ought to just hear a little bit about what the HR committee's 2021 program will look like. So I want to spotlight. Let's see if I can find her.
I'm here.
Yeah, we'll get you. So Therese, why don't you tell us a little bit about what's coming up in the HR committee in the next year?
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. AmCham's HR committee's 2021 program is going to focus on agile HR and building a proactive and dynamic organization. And we have events that will explore company culture and employee engagement in a new paradigm, the employee experience, talent attraction, AI, and the impact on diversity, and leading through crisis, and a lot more. So we'll be launching the program in January, so keep your eyes out for that.
Excellent, thanks, Therese.
You're welcome.
And then also, I just want to remind you to don't miss out on our next AmCham webinar, which will be a pan-Nordic session on the 2020 election results and preview of the Biden-Harris administration. This will be with Fox News Radio's White House correspondent, John Decker. So don't miss out on that. You can still register online. Session. So with that, let's get started. And to kick off, the workplace as we know it is changing for the better. Today, we'll hear from executives who are leading in a people-centric manner and how they build a workplace that is great for both employees and the company. Today's speakers are Richard Wright from Roche, Anne-Marie Raun from IBM, and Tor van Woerden from AmCham. Additionally, we're delighted to have Anja Steentoft-Jacobsen from Aperian Global, who has kindly agreed to help us moderate the panel discussion. And once again, if you have questions during the presentations, please don't hesitate to write your question in the chat. So with that, I'm really pleased to introduce our first speaker, Richard Wright, General Manager of Roche and AmCham's chairman, here to share how his organizational restructure has created a people-centric organization. Rich, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Steve. Good morning, everyone. Nice to be with you all virtually. And thanks so much to AmCham for the opportunity to chat with you all today. I have no slides, so I'm just going to share with you a few reflections over the next few minutes, and maybe, dare I say, even provoke your thinking a little bit. But please, feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions. I think the first thing that struck me when I was, asked to kind of have a conversation with you guys on this really exciting and important topic is this principle of, a human-first workplace actually relies on a philosophy at an organizational level that supports it. It needs to be more than just words and deeds. And I just want to give you an example of that. So we had our international CEO, Bill Anderson, who was interviewed by Burson last week, actually. So I'm not sure if you saw that article or not. But during it, the journalist challenged him a little bit on a competitive environment that we find ourselves in, and almost a race to market with a Danish company, actually. And he was really around sales, market share, who's going to get there first. And Bill made a very interesting comment when he said, well, I don't really care. He said, I don't see other companies as the competition. I see beating cancer as the competition. And he said, we have a purpose, which is around the world that we bring 2 to 3 or 3 to 5 times more innovation for half the cost to society. And he said, and all I ask is every single one of my 100,000 employees around the world strive to get us one step closer to doing that. And it really struck me that, that's a philosophy that an entire organization we follow. And so, what does that mean for us in Denmark? Well, we're moving away from management to leadership. We're removing barriers of hierarchy and autonomy and really allowing our individuals and our colleagues to flourish in a more stable and less hierarchical organization. And so we move away from performance driven by KPIs, by sales, by market share, to one of outputs and outcomes, and indeed mindset as well. And so we move away from people who have job roles to people who have capabilities. And the value they bring is not necessarily what they do, but who they are. And so as part of our transformation, we've even gone further than that to say, okay, well, let's start to break down the silos of work and allow people to swarm to areas that they find interesting and to work where they feel they'll get more personal development and flourish greater. And so we've inherently put in a model in our organization in Denmark that removes performance and career progression from going up the ladder to moving and broadening breadth of experience. And we're asking our colleagues to not think about career as just, I have to get to the top, but more, what are the opportunities for me to develop and grow and learn as I move through different roles in the organization? But that's kind of process driven. I think the thing that we've certainly reflected on and realized is, as leaders, for that to succeed, we have to show a genuine interest in our people. We have to care about our people and care about them, not because they're just an asset to our organization, but because they're a human being, because they're an employee that we have a responsibility for. And again, just to give you a tangible example of that, we all know this year's been, particularly difficult with COVID, and it's been particularly difficult for many of our employees. And when we made the conscious decision when we went into the first lockdown, that we said to our employees, work or don't work, it's up to you. You're going to be in a house with children climbing up the walls, homeschooling, maybe spouses that also have to be working. If you work 1 day a week or 5 days a week, we don't mind. Your focus is your own mental health, your family, and that close part around you. And we got lots of great feedback from our colleagues and employees as a result of that. And that's enabled us to continuously focus on mental health in these difficult times. And actually, we were just chatting with the other speakers before we started. We haven't closed our office down. We've told all our employees they should be working from home, but the office is open on a skeleton staff so that if someone just from a mental health perspective needs to be in the office, they have access to it. Obviously all the COVID restrictions and rules applied. And so we, again, this is the element of we're thinking about our employees. And so, I think one of the things that we've really understood is as leaders, this isn't easy. We have to understand that human behavior inherently is adverse to change and is adverse to uncertainty. And yet that's absolutely the world that we live in, both in terms of our transformative organization in Roche, but the broader societal challenges that we have at the moment. And so people are willing to come on the journey of human first workplace, and I would dare say they even want to, but they have to feel they trust us as leaders to put a safe environment in place to enable them to do that. And so that's all great, but so what? I mean, how do we know that's working? How do we know this unbelievable disruption that we're putting in place for our organization, the challenge we're giving our employees to think and behave and work? Well, I think one of the things we're proudest of is, as we went right through this first transformation, Great Place to Work was happening at the same time. And as many of you know better than I do, big part of Great Place to Work is the employees giving feedback on their company. And so we were right in the mix of removing all these remote roles, removing departments, removing hierarchy, removing line managers, and telling people to work in this completely different way. And really destabilizing what has been a very traditional, stable organization. And right through that process, we actively said, well, we're still going to get involved in Great Place to Work. We're still going to do the survey. We want to find out what our colleagues are thinking about this. And, we're so proud that we actually came first in that mid-size organization category right while we were going through this process. And it really reiterated to us that you can bring organizations to a human first place, and you can take organizations on transformation, but you've just got to be there to support the organization as you do it. And for me as a general manager, what's exciting is that we are being seen as one of the leading countries worldwide as we go on this journey, and to be seen at the forefront of a human-first workplace, an organisation where our employees are not just an asset, but the most important thing for our organisation. And, you know, all of us have regular phone calls with countries all around the world sort of asking for insight and support as we do that. We're undoubtedly becoming more efficient and effective in the way, and we're certainly unlearning a great deal of what historically we've learned before. And what this means is we're starting to think in a different way. So we talk about this shift from purpose to purpose with, i.e., rather than doing what we think is best for our customers and, you know, citizens around the world, we're actually co-creating and developing it with them. And it's our human first organization that allows us to do that, because we're empowering our colleagues to be out and working and creating and not stuck in an office or trying to hit KPIs and measures. And most importantly, my business is stable. You know, I've not seen any huge fluctuations as we've gone through this transformation, and it shows that we continue to maintain a business while completely changing the way we approach that business. So, you know, in summary, I have no crystal ball, obviously, none of us do, but I think the future looks really bright. I think we are starting to see our people grow, develop and flourish. And it's, as I said, not because of what they do, but it's because of who they are. And it's because of what they want to achieve for themselves primarily, for their customers around them, and then also for Roche. And I think it's the focus of that makes us a human first workplace. So with that, I think hopefully I'm on time, Steve, so I'll just sort of pause there if there's any questions.
Thanks, Rich. Super insightful, great story. Tell me, looking into 2021, what do you see as a couple of your biggest challenges to sustain what's been going on? Do you see any, tangible hurdles coming up that you're a bit unsure of?
Look, I think the uncertainty of the world we live in at the moment is a challenge for all of us. I mean, how do you maintain a human first workplace in a digital environment? How do you maintain that personal interaction, that level of support, that level of cohesiveness that is, required for organizations like this? And one of the things we're battling with is how do we maintain that fun and feeling of being part of something big when we're all sitting at homes, in our offices. So that's a big thing that we're focusing on. And again, as I've alluded to, the other part is just maintaining this sort of mental health of our employees and that work-life balance, which the Danes are famously good at.
And from a company standpoint, Rich, have you guys as a company, I mean, I know you don't have to share your, the details of turnover and all that, but has there been some impact on as far as COVID impact and production levels when you put the, employee first, or is it an upside all the way?
Yeah, no, I don't. I mean, as I said, our business is good, it's stable, and this is much more about the intricacies of how we work within that, and as I said, how we, more with our stakeholders in the ecosystem around us. Undoubtedly, if I look at it from a patient perspective, there are citizens around Denmark who should be getting treatment that haven't been because of COVID, and there are 100 reasons for that we won't go into. But our focus has been very much around using the agility and the flexibility of our organisation to really focus in and support those. And I'm amazingly proud of my organisation, the people within it, in terms of how they've battled the difficulties of COVID to ensure that purpose I alluded to right at the beginning and the patients and citizens of Denmark continue to be our #1 focus.
Super. Well, we're out of time, and we'll get you back in the panel discussion in a bit. So stick with us, Rich. Thanks for that insight, and we'll move on in our program.
Thanks, Steve.
So next up, I'm pleased to introduce Anne-Marie Raun. She's the HR director at IBM. Anne-Marie also sits on the steering group for the HR committee and is committed to a people-centric workplace with a focus on enhancing the bottom line. So with that, welcome to you, Anne-Marie. The screen is yours.
Thank you. And I think I actually brought a couple of slides that we will try to speed through, because obviously with all the changes to the digital meeting, so I don't know if you want to bring those slides up, but while you do that, obviously, good morning to everybody, and happy to be with you on this morning. I wish we could have all met face to face, because that's just what I prefer, but I think that, to Rich's point as well, you know, we have really, as a Danish team, I think, you know, you can also say that maybe as somewhat global statement, I think to a very large extent, I think we have all been able to just transform into this new digital world of being together in a virtual environment. But and I'd also just prepare you that asking me to speak on a people-centric organization will, you know, always also mean that I will include a technological viewpoint to it, because basically we're IBM and technology is really at the heart of what we do. I don't know, Therese, if you, I cannot see the slides moving.
Your slides are up now. Your first slide is up.
Okay.
So yeah.
I'm somehow I cannot see it, but either which way.
Can we just check with the people on the line if they can see it, because I could only see it when I took presenter view.
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah, it's you.
Thank you.
So I have the housekeeping items on my screen. Well, anyway, so so basically we are most certainly living very you know, difficult, or not maybe difficult, but different times from what we have experienced before, and I think you know, many of us have not ever seen anything like this. And when Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen on March 11 closed all of Denmark down, obviously, like all other people in Denmark, IBM, our teams were obviously shocked and also concerned with what lie ahead of us at that point in time. We were, of course, also humbled about the huge task that lay ahead of us, as we are running the critical infrastructure for many large companies in Denmark. We serve public clients who communicate with their clients, the Danish citizens, via their tools and platforms. We serve large retail companies like Dagrofa and Danish Supermarket, and make sure that they are actually able to deliver their goods to their clients, the supermarkets, like, you know, toilet paper, to name one. And obviously a lot of other companies like Nets, Danske Bank, Nordea, Danish Defense, you know, the list is long. So we were, of course, humbled by that situation. We were actually taking this very seriously to make sure that the Danish society would not experience any fallouts in processing credit card transactions, for example, to just name one. But moving seamlessly from a physical world to a digital and virtual world was really a big challenge for us. But I think it's also fair to say that we managed this seamlessly. We haven't had any fallouts. I think all the goods were delivered on time, and basically we as a company, to also Rich's point, are extremely proud of our employees. And I'd like to say that although IBM obviously focuses a lot on our clients and serving them in the best possible way, our first and foremost, most important target or goal throughout this crisis or times have been the safety and well-being of our employees, and that's just who we are and the DNA. And I guess, I mean, that's probably going to be the same for most of us in the team. And I still cannot see any slides on my screen. I don't know.
Okay, so right now everybody else seems to be able to see it, but we've got your future of work, the IBM journey, the COVID-19 transforming the way we work, technology, focus on learning. So that slide is the one that's up.
All right. Okay. So I have my slide here. I don't know.
So just tell us when to switch to the next one, and we'll follow you from there.
So please. So yeah. So what I wanted to share with you today is obviously just a little bit of the transformation that we are going through right now, both from an HR. From an HR perspective, and I want to talk a little bit about the digital change and obviously what we focus on, some of the focus areas, and then I'd like to just share with you some of our ideas on the future of work from both a physical but also a mental well-being perspective, and then I'd like to touch upon what it means to lead in a virtual world. So anyway. I guess I can say next slide. The next slide should be probably one that says there will be no more snow days. Can you see that now?
Yeah, well, what we're gonna do, we're just gonna reboot the slide deck here momentarily, just to see if we can't get it up so you can actually see it.
So while you do that, I'll just keep on talking. So I was on a call with a couple of or some of the top most powerful women in the US. It was a Forrester call where they were talking about how how the COVID-19 crisis obviously had also impacted technology and driven digitalization. And our CEO or former CEO, Gina Romero, thank you, now I can see it. Gina Romero, and she said this line that there will be no more snow days. And while digital reinvention as a long-term goal, important but maybe not so urgent, now has become a condition for survival, I thought, wow, did we actually stop and think about that? With employees going to work from home, closure of non-essential establishments, and any other forms of contact, that physical world needs to move to virtual in a matter of days. And the pandemic has definitely accelerated digital transformation across all industries, and I think we can all agree to that. But if we bring that a little bit closer to home, and this is where the whole there will be no more snow days sentence actually come into play. I think digitalization has changed the ways that we see schools and in education facilities actually do what they were supposed to do, or delivering their core business at the beginning of the crisis, at least. And getting to that stage, at least in the Danish society as we know it, where we today, or where we would normally have to go through different kinds of approval sessions, hearing consultations with different groups of people, unions, what have you, that could have taken forever. And basically most schools, just in a matter of weeks, actually were able to move from a physical to a virtual world in delivering their core business, so to speak. So I think this autonomy, or as we in IBM would like to think of it, agility, will define the way that we work in the future, and also the way that we collaborate. And I think there are numerous examples to this across all industries, basically. And I think it was Winston Churchill who said that, never miss a good crisis, or as we say in Denmark, der er intet, der er så skidt, at det ikke er godt for noget. I think, maybe this at least is one of the good outcomes of the COVID-19 crisis. So if you move to the next slide, please. Yeah, so, but what is that? And now my screen's still freezing, but anyway. So if we move to, so what has this actually meant from to my HR team? So first and foremost, we have had to find different ways of communicating and connecting to our employees when we do not see them in the office every day. We have to find ways to connect to our leaders, and also collaborate with them to connect in a better and different way with their teams. And together with Josh Burson, who's a global industry analyst and has been doing work within the HR space for the last 20 years, IBM did a survey or a report We called it the Accelerating the Journey to HR 3.0. And that study shows that the pandemic has permanently shifted the expectations that the employees have to their employers. And to Richard's remark, employees now expect that their employers take an active role in supporting their mental and physical well-being, and also providing training for them to have the skills that they will need to work in new ways. And obviously to HR professionals and to HR managers, I think it's fair to say that we had already starting that journey, but that has also been, accelerated. We use AI, we use automation across the HR arena to support faster and forward-thinking decision-making, and basically free up time for us to deliver higher value work and improve things like the employee experience. And obviously, as we look to the post-pandemic future, creating, flexible ways of working, new policies, and tailoring training for future and in-demand skills, we will have to help our teams consider new workforce strategies and re-architecting roles that are better aligned with today's growing demands and safety concerns. And obviously, also another important area for us will be on learning. The technological and digital shift we will see post the COVID-19 crisis will increase that demand for learning across all roles, basically. We know that companies and employees will increasingly apply new digital tools and leverage new technologies, which will drive automation, to name one. And the skills gaps for our employees will grow as a consequence of that. And you probably have a view in your company of how much training you want to provide to your teams throughout the year. And in IBM, we have a long-standing and proud tradition of running training and education for our employees, because obviously the world that we live in, there's a huge technical shift that it basically, reinvents itself every 5 to 3 years, depending on what area we're working within. But we have a commitment that all IBMers have to do at least 40 hours of training every year. This was installed, I can't recall, maybe 8 years ago. And today we know that this will not be sufficient going forward. In fact, 40 hours will only maintain status quo. And in some areas, it won't even maintain status quo. So we have to work with our employees to make sure that they actually have the skills for the futures. And I also believe that this will be a game changer or in that war for talent as we know it. Employees will look to those companies who are actually able to secure the market value to make them employable also in the post-pandemic world or in the future as we move further along that road. So, and I'd also share with you a little bit of the what do you call that, the way that we look at this. Obviously, sending people off to our physical classroom training, we may not believe so much in that anymore. Obviously, in some cases that makes good sense, but on-the-job training, I think, will be much more valuable going forward. I think turning workplace into a learn place, doing on-the-job training will be much more efficient for a lot of the work that we will be doing. And I think, at least in some cases, our experience also shows that has benefited our employees more than actually going to a classroom and then coming back. And there's still, the adaptation of the different two ways of learning. There is actually a difference in that perspective as well. So, and then I'd also like to add that obviously, while these are, and if you just flip to the next slide, please, because we identified 10 important areas that we want to focus on as part of this report that we built together with Josh Burson. And while these are all very important, I also would like to mention that the team that I engage the most with these days is our health and safety team. We have a big health and safety organization in IBM, who are actually only focusing on, while we focus on technology and learning, but also, building that security net for employees where we focus on their mental and physical well-being. Obviously, it's important that we do not just work 12 hours every day. It's important that we take the breaks and we get that, a little bit of energy to our brains and not just sit in front of the screens every day. So that has been a very important focus area for us. We have mental well-being Wednesdays. We do online yoga. We do online courses. We had Chris McDonald come in and speak to our employees. We will have more people coming in and talking to our employees and giving them good advice on actually how to work in this virtual world. So my screen is still freezing here, but I'll just go on. Now, future of work and physical work, of course. So there, obviously, while we focus on all the well and the mental well-being of our employees, we also think about how we want what the office will be like when we invite them back. And I'm sure that you also discuss that in your companies. Will we need the thousands of square meters that we have today? We will still have a lot of people working from home, and it is our view that a lot of people will still continue to work from home. We have executives who never work from home, who actually come to me and say, it's actually quite efficient to work from home. I get the things done, I'm efficient, I get to speak to my teams, I do what I have to do. And I'm also, enjoying working from home. So what will the office look like in the future? And we're thinking a lot about that. I would like to show a slide that has some of this on it. I don't know whether
we're on the slide with 1, 2, 3, 4 on it right now. Should we move forward one?
Okay. Thank you, Stephen. So we believe that the office in the future will be a social hub. This is where we meet to have meetings. We meet face to face to create new ideas. This is where we meet to be innovative, learn from each other. And as I mentioned before, we want to turn the workplace into a learn place. Then of course, all the introverts are happy that they get to return to the safety of their home offices, and the rest of us, the extroverts, will maybe hang around for a coffee and stay. But I think it's very important that we create that an environment where we can actually, make people choose. It doesn't really make sense to come into the office and sit in virtual meetings all day long. We might as well use the time we're here to be productive and, innovate and create new ideas together. I was on a call with somebody from Harvard where we actually discussed this whole topic around innovation, and there are concerns that innovation will stop in a virtual world. And this actually took place when we're in the beginning of the pandemic. And I think it's fair to say that in many ways, innovation has really accelerated because we have just found new ways of getting things to work. And I think that's a very important learning part from this crisis. I think agility, least viable product, all these things that we have, worked a little bit with mean a huge difference for us going forward. And now, my last slide is on virtual leadership, and I hope you can see the pledge that we created in IBM. So
we can see that slide now.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. So when we sent all of our employees home back in March, this pledge that I'm sharing with you here was created by grassroots in the company and very, very quickly became a global pledge, something that everybody shared on social media and our own internal social media. And to be honest, I think this has been very reassuring or a great way for actually to work as a team, working from home, being able to just go to work and be yourself and not caring so much about whether you would have a good or a bad camera day. But how do we lead in a virtual world? I think that's a very interesting point, and I for one do not have all the answers to that. But I think it's about being personal. It's about reaching out and actually not calling your employees and always asking them about the project or the progress that we're making, but basically just asking the questions: how are you, and are you well and safe? How's your family, your spouse, your children? Being personal, and I think I have spoken to some of our leaders, and I think that's also a learning point for them, because that's not normally how they would interact with their employees. So we would walk the corridors on a normal day and actually look people into the eye, and maybe that way see how people are doing. Have that luxury today, and I think it's very much about creating those virtual corridors that will actually bring us a little bit closer to our employees. We think that caring for our employees basically span across 3 different dimensions. So mental well-being, showing empathy, and actually also being productive, enabling employees in the new ways of working to also be productive while we support them in their ability to to move across different environments. I think my time is running out, but if you move to the last slide, I think it's really, leadership is not about being a hero, but truly about caring for your employees. And I think that's what we have also learned from this pandemic, and also will be the one of the cornerstones of how we will interact with our employees going forward. So by that, I'll close. And I'm sorry, I apologize. This is been a little chaotic. I don't know where I am, but anyway.
Thank you, Anna Marie. It's been a great presentation, some great food for thought. So let's move on to our next speaker right away. We just have to keep the time here. So let's move right on to our next speaker, who is Tor van Voorden, country manager at AmCham. Tor is consistently praised by his employees as one of the most human-centric leaders. How does he do this and run a great business? Tor, welcome.
Well, thank you. And this is indeed a huge topic, and just in the interest of time, I will just focus on a specific item, which is how do we create, how do we do value creating teams in our organization? And I think that's one of the dilemmas where we have is how do we create that value? How do we assess that value? And do we have also with the things coming up at a more deeper and personal level, how do we work on that in an organization? I want to take you back to 2006. I was just a newly appointed head of key account management. It was my first leadership job, and I was working, of course, after the assumptions do no harm, but harm I did. In a sense that when you come in as a new manager, you try to do everything right, and you try to connect on an individual level, and you try to create a team structure and so on. Nonetheless, 9 months later, 75% of my team had left and were finding other, exciting opportunities out there. And it was also really a time for me to look in and say, okay, how should I do this? And how do I also create fast a learning and really value creating team? And basically what I did, I looked around in the environment. I looked after, okay, so these people should kind of be the same network, know the same people. They should be relatable so they could relate to each other. They should be looking a bit alike so that we fast came into a cohesive team. And by that, I could really fast get to the place where I got a value creating team, maybe not at 100%, but maybe at 85 or 90%. So that was kind of the aim. And then fast forward 14 years, I can see that was completely wrong. That was simply not the way to do it. The focus had been to create an executing team fast. But what I missed and what I can see now also with the things coming our way is that is just simply not the way of doing it anymore. Now it's more, how do you bring in that diversity? How do you bring in the different and the difference into teams? Because that will mean that you are more likely to maybe hit 100% on teams, or maybe 110%. But it's also where you need to have patience. And I'm coming at this from not a a scholar HR view, but just an operator, leadership operator, where it's really balancing patience, balancing human emotions, and trying to create value every day. And I think that's the hard part. Just moving on to the next slide, and this, well, my second slide it is, and that's pretty much my only content slide. So how do we build the value creating organization? And I'm balancing this. So on the left hand side, you see the focus of integrating humans into the teams, and then on the right hand side we have the future, where we are trying to integrate humans on a deeper level than what we've done before. So basically what we do today in AmCham is that when we have teams and we try to create those value creating teams as fast as possible, we do it out of a mold where we have 5 leadership principles. And those 5 leadership principles are also in the text. It's part of our vision on how do we do our teamwork in AmCham. And the focus is very much the same as it will be in the future, we expect, because it's all about, 1, do we agree on the direction? Are we absolutely sure that we are running in the same direction and we are going for the same goal? Secondly, how do we, in a world as filled up with data and a lot of work, create a focus on key problems? And that's across functions. We want to focus on the top 3 problems that really make a difference out there. And that is an obstacle we see today, that can be difficult. Also with big data and the huge amount of things coming in, the ability to create focus in an organization, that's difficult. So how do we work on key problems? Thirdly is ownership. So when you come into a team and you have your function and you sit in that job, how do you make sure that you are actually having the ownership? You know when you have the authority, you know when you have the ability to act and run with it. And that is needed from a leadership point of view. You need to provide a lot of guidance there to make sure that everybody knows how they're going into this. And by that, they can also grow because they know where they can take the ownership. Fourthly, we have loyalty. And for us, loyalty is not so much that it's important that you are loyal to your colleague. Of course, that's a given. But we do not like the misunderstood loyalty. And that's also where I, as a country director, tell my people that if they have repeatedly come and told me that there are issues that is not in line with our mission to serve patients, and I'm ignoring them, then they have a free card to contact my manager and whistleblow on me, because it's so important that we focus on serve patients. That's what is the most important thing we are loyal towards. So that's a key component. And then fifth and the last principle is really about dialogue. And the dialogue part has also been investigated with Google and different different companies that have looked into this. How do you create the most effective teams? But we think dialogue, listening, giving feedback, that is really a key component of every organization, and especially every team that needs to create value. So those things are given. That's not something we want to compromise on, and we also think that is what will drive us and drive our value creation going forward. However, I think we also are in a situation where we are trying to handle the things that are coming our way. And this is very much on a mindset level. So not so much about the new technology and so on, but more how do we handle the new things that's happening in the environment. And we at AmCham has come out with a global program now, which is trying to go down and more connect on a deeper human level. So I've put up these 3 categories. So intellectual, emotional, and values. It's not new, but it's just at a different level that we've done this. So first of all, it's intellectual. How do we make decisions? How do we make sure that we as leaders are not biased, but by the different cognitive biases that's out there, and that's a new program for us, and that's also on deep intellectual level, that you kind of assess how you make decisions, which is different from what I've experienced before, and it would be an important component. It's something we bring up in meetings, especially we just had our HR calibration, where the biases are really important to address, to give everybody a fair chance. Also, how do we really cut through all the noise that's in your workplace today with all the things coming in? We are a lean organization. We're trying really, again, to focus on the key problems. I think where we are seeing a big change these years is really within agility and the agile way of working. So the way of really focusing, working in teams and making sure that you do it in a shorter time than you did before. So really getting more light out of the energy that you put in. On the emotional part, I think that is also where we can see that where we probably are lacking some tools and some tactics. I think that the way forward is important. That it's really about how do we create that belonging to your job. I think it's a key component. But it is also difficult, because what are the tactics you should use to create that belonging? Because belonging is a deeper emotional state, and the way that we see belonging is different from person to person. So how do you as a company do that? We are of course trying to look at our mission. We are trying to get people together and so on. But I think that's where in an HR community I would ask, how do we get those tactics in place? Because I think that the vision is clear, that we need to create that diversity, create that belonging, but how you actually do it and how you create those tactics, I think that's the difficult part that I'm looking at from a leadership perspective. And then finally, on the values, we like diversity. And coming back to my 2006 story about the team, there was not a lot of diversity. And I can see with the organizations that I'm running now that diversity is really a key component of how we are building teams today. I have 2 other sister sites. So across Denmark, we have over 10 different nationalities. We have really a good balance between men and female. I think that is very positive. That's really where we create new perspectives, get new ideas, and bring that into the team. So that is something that we need to do going forward. But diversity in thought, how do you do that? And that's, again, coming back to my 2006 story, because the diversity of thought was not the thing I was looking at back in 2006. It was more about how do you create fast teams that can execute. I don't have the patience to wait to get that really unique talent in. I need to go out because of pressures and so on. Today I would do it differently. And going forward, we will for sure be doing that. And I see my HR business partners, one of the most important jobs she has is to make sure that we look at diversity, that when we look at candidates, that she brings in that perspective and ask the right questions. Have we looked really at what we need and the kind of talent that can bring in new ideas? So we're not going just for 80 or 85%, but we are going for 100 or 110%. So that is really where I see the challenge. I see that we are now going from being very team focused to more look and how can we create, or how can we get individuals into the teams that are more alike, to now looking at individuals and seeing, okay, how can we create teams that are so diverse but also so high on acceptance that they can bring in different and diverse talent and really leverage that. So I think that's the challenge, and that's also where I have my own small tools, but I'm really looking forward to what the HR community is coming up with in terms of tactics to really build that for the future. That was just my short presentation. Thanks.
Thanks, Tor. Well put, very insightful, and you've been on quite a journey and learned a lot, obviously. So in the name of time, I think let's move right into the panel discussion. And so let me just introduce that here briefly. We're really pleased to have Appearing Global's Anja Steentoft Jacobsen, who's going to set the scene and moderate an interactive panel discussion. So Anya, let me turn the screen over to you, and you have a few slides to go through to set the scene. And I know also that you've already fielding some questions, and you're going to get back to those. So everybody, please continue to write your questions, and they will be addressed. So, Anya, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Stephen. And I do see a couple of good questions in there, but do keep them coming as we go. And I know we're running short on time, so I'll try and make it a little bit briefer than I had originally thought. So if you don't mind moving to the next slide. So before we start the panel discussion, I just would like to add a few thoughts from myself as a work from home dinosaur, but also from our experience at Apparent Global, where we've been helping organizations such as yours to work more effectively across boundaries. And of course, in this massive shift that we've seen over the course of the pandemic, that boundary has been more the virtual than any other type of boundary that we've worked with before. And I thought it would just be really interesting to quickly take a look at, if you move to the next slide, and just click through the animations there, because we talk about the role of the leader. And what we have found, and please just click right through the three, yes. What we've found really is that we see successful leaders in this environment really being able to lead and collaborate across these three types of virtual distance. And it's really around the contextual distance, and this is also what I'm hearing both Richard and Marie and Tor touch upon. How are we aligned on the purpose? How do we share meaning in our organization? So that's very, very a big part of that now that we're all virtual. The second one is the relationship. And we know, long distance relationships are tricky, and it's no different from virtual relationships, which we've also heard. It's a little bit harder, but we can focus in on understanding that cultural diversity that's in our team, work style preferences, cognitive styles, some of the things that Tor also just touched upon. Try to understand what's going on from that perspective, and then all important trust is part of that as well. But the final element I want to zoom in on here is the third pillar there, which is the communication piece, and how it's different in the virtual environment where it's so easy to get lost. And Marie talked a little bit about introverts and extroverts, but how can successful leaders are able to set a rhythm of exchanging ideas and thoughts, opinions, conflicting ideas and discussions and negotiations to reach a common ground. So let me just take a little moment just to zoom in on that. If you move to the next slide, because research is clear that lack of face-to-face makes it even more important for leaders to be able to balance formal and informal communication and encourage their team members to balance that as well. And so encouraging virtual socializers, getting together in video, give people time and space to share non-work issues as well, to help them connect, more easily communicate, seek out sentiments and opinions, especially of quieter members, to ensure that all voices are being heard. Coming back a little bit to how can we create a space where people feel they can belong and be heard as well. Another important element is that notion of synchronous and asynchronous communication, because same time asynchronous communication becomes a little bit more difficult, especially if you are spanning many time zones, and people can quickly feel that they are cut off from information flow. So becoming comfortable with asynchronous or anytime communication on platforms such as Microsoft Teams channels or Slack is important. Also to make the most of the synchronous time that you then have together when everyone is on the same page. So planning your virtual communication with synchronous and asynchronous elements, also to help you create those opportunities for all voices to be heard. So if some are not so comfortable speaking up in the virtual conference calls or need time to circulate questions in the group, you can provide maybe a shared document in SharePoint or OneNote, or a Microsoft Teams application or Google Docs so that people can give that input when they're ready, which can then be discussed in a synchronous call, right? So we have many virtual meetings these days, so it's important to make every single one count and truly utilize those synchronized opportunities for meaningful exchanges, for allowing that, Richard, Anne-Marie, Tori, you all talked about it, that purpose really to sift through and have us think about when we are creating these same time exchanges, what is it exactly that we need to, what's the purpose of those? So broadly speaking, this is the communication pillar in our three-legged model of virtual distances for where we see successful leaders really excelling. So with this, I'd just like us to start the panel discussion and maybe even start out with any immediate reactions to this from our panelists while you all are typing questions in through the chat. Tor and Marie or Rich, any reactions to this?
Anya, I liked your principle around the synchronization of this virtual world. Now, I think one of the things that I've observed though is this challenge that we all find of you start your first Zoom meeting at 8 and you finish it at the last one at 7 in the evening, and unlike being in an office environment, you can't just drop off and go and have a chat around the coffee machine, or it's just constant. And I think we have to be conscious of, if a human first workplace involves this element of socialization and non-work specific interactions, how do we ensure that we just we don't kill all our people by Zoom or Teams and bring that kind of social interaction piece into it as well?
Yeah, it's a great point, Richard. And I think it comes back to, again, that purpose-driven virtual communication infrastructure, so that you really need to make time for planning these things. So when you do decide to bring people together, not thinking about it as a one-time event, but really thinking about it as a process so that people have time to reflect and think. And when you are together, maybe you don't need an hour, maybe you don't need an hour and a half. You can do it in less time, but make that time really valuable, because we are seeing Zoom fatigue, to your point. Absolutely. Thank you, Richard.
Yeah, so I think that in many ways our organization were used to working from home, having that flexibility. So in the Danish organization, we didn't see a big issue in changing those. The biggest change was that you had to do it all the time, I think. But I think what has changed in AmCham is that suddenly both our American colleagues, but also our European colleagues, are doing something they've never done before. They are sitting at home working, having that kind of flexibility. And that really it has just poured a lot of investments into new communication tools. I think that's probably the biggest change, that we can do more in terms of communication, and the world has just gotten much smaller than before. So I think that has for us been the biggest change, is that we actually have good tools that enable us to have effective and productive meetings and collaborations. And then I totally agree with you, Richard. It is really it is a drag to sit in all those meetings again and again. So I think that's probably working from home 2.0 is that how do we also make time for real work and for real engagement instead of just sitting in Zooms.
And Anne-Marie here, if I can just share what we have done. So quite early after we sent people home, our CEO and I actually invited people to join roundtables where we asked them how they were doing, to get the feedback from the employees, because I think as leaders, we sometimes fall into that little pitfall saying that, well, we know what everybody needs, and so we'll set out the whole framework on how we will interact. And I think it's extremely important, and now more than ever, to get the feedback from the teams, what they want us to do. Are they getting the help they need? How do we build those virtual corridors, and how can we replace that casual coffee machine conversation that people are missing, the business opportunities that also sometimes comes out of those casual conversations? How can we actually replace that, and how can we create that space where people can interact? And I'm totally with you on that. One of the first things that we did was to send out a guide on how to run efficient virtual meetings.
Yeah.
And exactly to your point, meetings do not have to be 1 hour long. The default in most, what do you call that? Mail systems is to set up a meeting that is 1 hour.
Yeah.
It can easily be 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's, most of the time enough.
Yeah, all depends on the purpose. Thank you so much, Anne-Marie. Thank you, Tor, for that. We do actually have some very good questions here in the chat. Richard, I don't know if you've had a chance to kind of sift through them, or you just want me to pick some of them, because I know, oh no, I'll let you respond to that. Or
well,
some,
no,
Stephen.
they're great questions, Anya. I agree, both from Elizabeth and Torsten, and maybe just a thought that could address both of them. So, I think as we've been talking about, this evolution of leadership is absolutely key. So, and the move from traditional management to leadership, and certainly what we've been reflecting on in our organisation is this principle of VACC, which you may have heard. And that the role of leadership is about being a visionary, so setting the direction, this purpose that you alluded to, Anya. But then the A and the C are this sort of architect and catalyst. So if we manage in terms of you must do this or you have to do this, certainly in a virtual world, it becomes increasingly difficult for our employees to find ownership and belonging in terms of that. Whereas the principle of joining dots up to allow our employees to best find solutions themselves and develop. So that architect catalyst piece brings in a whole new mechanism. And then the last C is the coaching piece. And I think, very much to Tore's comment, as leaders in a virtual environment or a real environment, the element of coaching rather than telling and supporting and I see a lot of leaders giving great feedback, not necessarily great coaching. And so this ability to coach our employees to find their own way and their own solution, I think is absolutely how you bring the best out of them. So, for me, that's this evolution of the leadership capabilities that maybe answers a couple of those questions from my perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Richard. Thinking of Tor's and Elizabeth's question there as well. And Maria or Tor, anything you want to add to that? Otherwise, we have a couple other questions there. Birgitta actually has a comment there, a great point on communication. And I think this is also what we have all alluded to during the presentations and the conversations here, that we don't spend enough time on establishing that shared understanding of how to do this. It emerges over time, but leaders' role is really critical in just propelling that forward a little bit. And it comes back all the way to the top of how we define that purpose for what it is that we do in our organizations and how we engage our employees around that. But if more questions are coming in, we can maybe come back to. I know we're running short on time. Stephen, do you want to move ahead?
We're still fine on time, so I say field the questions that are there, and if anybody, just keep the conversation going. We'll run for another 5 minutes for sure.
Great. So I had actually a thought here, and it comes to also what's in the question here, and something that you talked about, Anne-Marie, in terms of that learning that if we look at the future of jobs report from 2020 by World Economic Forum, some even suggest that it's a call for reskilling revolution, I think they call it, right? And that up to 40% of current employees' core skills expecting to change in the next 5 years. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that. You talked about it, Anne-Marie, but Richard and Tor, anything you want to share from your perspectives here?
So in AmCham, we are moving away from the typical classroom type of education to now we're introducing a new system just shortly into the next year, which is kind of embracing the YouTube approach on learning. Yeah. So how do we more curate the right materials, find what's out there, bring it in for specific, specific tasks you have or specific problems you have. So we get a more learning environment repeatedly when we have things we need to look at critically on the educational level. So instead of having maybe you have 1 or 2 or 3 courses a year, now it's more an integrated part of your day where you have problems, you go on this new system, look at what are the problems. And I think that's kind of a new way of doing it. And I also think that's how most of our kids are learning today, is doing it really at need and not planned 1 year ahead. So I think that's a very interesting way, and that will take some time for everyone to really embrace that. But I think that's the way forward.
I agree. And I think it also addresses that challenge of knowledge sharing in this virtual environment, right? I know some organizations are even, and I don't know if that's the case with you, Tor, but some organizations are even making this almost like a live evolving handbook to kind of mimic that. You can't tap someone on the shoulder and say, I have a question. But you can go there, and if you experience something, you can type in how you experienced them or how you addressed it, and it kind of becomes this live document of knowledge sharing across the organization. Great example. Thank you, Tor.
And if I may just add, I think one thing that we can actually also learn from the children is just to be, curious.
Yeah.
And recognize that, learning is just it's a parameter that we all have to get used to and embrace, basically.
Yeah, I think that curiosity can take us far in many respects. Great. So what else do we have in the chat regarding the communication on Richard? Birgitte is curious to learn more, Richard, about how you get the leaders in the organizations to coach and drive effective communication and knowledge sharing in their teams. Can you share something around that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, we've effectively shaped our organization to support this. So my leadership team do not have the responsibility for driving the financial element of the business. The profit and loss part of it is driven by what effectively we would have historically termed general manager -2. My leadership team's responsibility is around coaching and development of their element of the organization and the people that sit within that. And so part of what they do is ensure that career developments are in place, this principle of moving around the organization for breadth of experience, but they also support and advocate this principle of self-managed and self-led teams. So teams come together to solve a problem and then they disband again. And that brings this sort of communication, the knowledge sharing, because as I alluded to, people join those teams not because of their job roles, but of the capability and mindset they bring to the team. And I have to say, we say every day is a learning day. I loved Tore's comment around diversity of thought. I thought that was super interesting because that in essence is what we're trying to achieve here, of how do these teams come together and share that thought, and while they might have a skill set fix their job, their thought process and the diversity, that's very different. So that's kind of how we're trying to go down that journey.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Richard. And just a quick time check, Stephen. How are we doing?
Yeah, it's about time to wrap things up. So maybe we ought to just go around and maybe we can just ask each one to wrap up and with a short concluding thought, and you can just manage that, Anya, and then just hand back to me when you're done with that.
Absolutely. So who wants to start? Anne-Marie, any concluding thoughts, or Tor, Richard? If there is one thing, yeah.
Well, I have one thought, and that's a comment of hope for HR functions, because I think we need HR functions more than ever. It is just a more and more critical part of our organization, both in how do we work, how do we engage minds, and create that also emotional engagement of staff, and how do we really navigate this really difficult time where that's coming up. So I think really the strong collaboration with the HR function is just critical in order to be a successful organization going forward.
Thank you, Tor. A follow-up to that, Anne-Marie? I think
I'm happy to say that, because obviously I think I'm more than ever. I think the collaboration basically between the HR teams and the leaders and the entire organization basically is more important than others. And just keep, I as I always say to our leaders, although they are leaders, they are employees too, and we all are, and we have a common and a joint responsibility to help everybody move forward.
Great. Thank you, Anne-Marie. And Richard, final remark from you?
I mean, I completely agree with all of those comments. I think as organizational leaders, our single biggest responsibility is to ensure that our people grow, develop, and flourish in the environments that we create for them. And and I firmly believe that if we do that, our businesses will look after themselves. And so I just encourage all of us as leaders, whether it be general managers or HR leaders, that that has to be our responsibility. And to Anne-Marie's point, our responsibility is to ensure that our leaders lead in that way as well. So I think it's a super exciting opportunity for us to move forward with this.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for sharing your thoughts and your different perspectives revolving around human first, the care aspect, the health, mental health aspect as well, purpose driven. I think this has been really insightful. So thank you so much for your time. And Stephen, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Anja, and great job. And once again, thanks to Richard, Anne-Marie, and Tor for sharing your unique insights with us this morning. Fantastic conversation. And again, Anja, fantastic job in moderating and your insights as well. So you can count on some follow-up on this. I believe slides, if I'm not mistaken, but we'll check, and if we can, we'll certainly get them out to everybody. And also, I'd just like to highlight an opportunity here. Anja and Aperion have kindly allowed us to tell you that they will offering you a 1-month free subscription to their Global Smart tool. It's a learning platform for organizations to succeed globally by supporting collaboration and inclusion. So you can work more efficiently and inclusively across borders. So everyone will receive the link on this offer in a follow-up mail, so you can look forward to that. And then with that, that wraps up our program today. Thanks again for all your cooperation on pivoting this to a very successful webinar. We look forward to meeting in person again in 2021. But until then, I just want to say thanks for joining. Enjoy the holidays. Stay safe, please.
Thank you very much, everyone. Likewise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks again, Rich and Anne-Marie and Tor and Anja. Great job. Some super good insight. There was a few more comments over in the, I think we got it pretty much through everything, right?
So, yeah.
Anja, I think there was one from Brigitte. Did we ever get that one on?
Was that
yes, Stephen.
Yeah.
Richard was very kind to answer it, so thank you.
Yeah. Good.
I think Richard hit the nail on a couple of them.
Yeah. Oh, good. I think we covered everything. And anybody that's still on and you have a quick question for somebody, feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question. We're just wrapping up in the last 5 minutes here as people head out. But I think it's so. Tell me, I had one question. Just overall, you guys are coming from very high-end industries, if you would. I mean, margins are probably different there than they are for restaurants and hotels and so on. Any thoughts on just how that applies to more traditional, hotel management and leadership? What's your thought? Any thoughts on that? Are there different sets of rules, or does this actually work in other industries as well that don't have maybe the margins that other more high-end industries have?
Are you asking that to the panel, or are you asking that to any of the attendees?
Anybody, I mean, Anya, anybody, Rich, I mean, I'm just always curious because sometimes you look at that and it's like, okay, I get it. But other industries have certain, constraints around bottom line and bottom line focus that maybe don't allow them to do that in the same way.
I think there may be a comment, Stephen, from Elizabeth.
Well, sorry, Stephen, that was for another question. So I'm parking myself on this one, but I have another question when people have answered this one.
No, go ahead. That was just filling the time, so I think we'll take yours.
Okay.
But
well, it was just getting back to Anne's presentation. I was very much in love with the pledge they made. We are working on something much less sexier that we call the way of working in BC Hospitality Group, but the pledge just offers so much more value-based approach that we really like. But I was wondering what you've done to implement it. I mean, who owns it? Did you take specific actions to roll it out in order to get people to live it? I very much doubt that simply somewhere central would have any effect. So I was curious about that, especially in these decentral times where it's difficult to rally up people and say, hey, friends, this is how we do it. This is the pledge we make. Any experiences on that would be interesting to hear.
I think Anya's now left the call, so she's not going to be able to help.
Yeah, and Marie's not here, but I think, Richard, I don't know if you want to comment on that with that purpose-driven perspective of yours.
Yeah, I can do. I've got, ironically, got to go to another Zoom meeting, but let me just, I'll say a few words on that. I mean, I obviously can't comment on the IBM approach, but for us, I think what we historically did was go, this is the ambition for the organization globally. That filters down into my boss's goals. That filters into my goals. I pass that down to them, and by the time it gets to, the real colleagues in the organization doing the work, it's completely meaningless. And so what we've done now is we've said, right, what is our purpose in Denmark? And our purpose is to ensure that we have better outcomes for citizens. Then we've said to our organization, what does that mean to you? And then whatever it means to you, then think about what you're going to do this year or this quarter. We work on 90-day cycles and make it practical for you. And so just to give you a really practical example, we have a canteen, a very nice canteen in our office. And it was for the first time I've ever seen the chefs in the canteen being able to associate something on a bigger level. And their interpretation of it was, well, if we make brilliant, healthy food for all of the employees, they'll be energized to go and do the best for patients or citizens in Denmark. And so this purpose kind of resonates with what practically you do. So it's more of this kind of take it for what is meaningful to you as an individual, not do it because I'm telling you to do it. So that's a little bit of how we've approached it.
Well, that makes so much sense, also leaning on the VEG and the servant leadership part, and really just living the continuous conversations in terms of building trust and accountability. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for that.
No problem. Right, I must leave you guys.
Yeah,
really
thanks,
nice.
Rich.
Thanks, Anya. Great facilitation.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Good. Then let's go and wrap this up. Anya, once again, thanks, and thanks, Brigitte, for your additional questions. And have a great rest of the week and a great weekend when you get so far.
Thank you so much for hosting this.
You betcha.
Yeah, thank you.
You bet. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.